And hello, this is Norm Buffnett Constantine bringing you another episode of On the Books right here from Bowie, Maryland at the Bowie Media Center's Ken Hill Center. With me again, my tried and true, almost sidekick, Eric Vargas. Welcome, Eric.
It's good to be back, Norm.
Well, it's good to have you because Eric, believe it or not, has published his massive 784-page manuscript called Things Fall Apart.
Actually, I cheated like hell with that one. It was supposed to be like 980, so I dropped the font size down from 11 to 10.8 to make it fit.
It's quite a read. It probably will take up your entire summer on the beach. But I recommend it, and you can get it, of course, at Amazon. And I recommend it to you because I have sat in Moni's Bar and Grill and had numerous conversations, or the place over at the town center, Wegmans Cafe.
Oh, good God.
And I've listened to people talk and talk and talk about this book. One of the things that continually comes up whenever Eric and I sit down at our Wednesday night book group, we always begin to talk about postmodernism, mostly in literature. Eric is convinced I'm a postmodernist. I don't know, maybe he's right. So Eric, why don't you give us your definition of postmodernism?
I would think postmodernism is mostly about deconstructing not just literature, but art in general, and ideologues and political systems. I think it's rooted deeply in Marxist ideology.
Postmodernism, you think, is rooted in Marxist ideology?
Yes, I do.
I'd like you to go a little deeper into that.
All right, well, I mean, so here's the thing with, it kind of goes back to Marx's critique in capitalism, where he says, well, and he makes some certain claims about what societies do. Like, well, okay, so he says all societies are really just institutions of oppression, that the apparatuses of a state are there to specifically to oppress the people. Now, they may have ancillary functions, but that their primary function is for the maintenance of the state. And that's true to a certain extent. I mean, but it's
right,
but only true. But it's true enough just to be dangerous. And so taking that from the postmodernists, it's like, well, they level that same critique on pretty much all of literature and on political systems. Say, well, they focus on the negative aspects of them, of which there are always going to be because people aren't perfect. But they say, well, this is bad, and so there has to be some kind of utopia that comes out of it.
Okay. Maybe I believe in the social construction of reality. Of that, there is no question. We all make our realities, and all our realities are different.
I disagree radically with that. I mean, certainly our belief systems. You could say, actually, you could think of our belief system as a kind of a overlay in which you perceive the world. So, I see a mirror and you might see something else, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a mirror. Subjective perception does not preclude objective reality.
Do you impose your value system over this book?
I try not to. Kubrick, when he made 2001, I always come back to him. When he was being interviewed on 2001, he was asked, well, what does that film mean? It was extraordinarily esoteric, and it was actually, and most of the problem was that it was visual. It did its storytelling through visual aspect as opposed to through dialogue. And he said he didn't want to give an answer. He said he didn't want to answer the question because he didn't want to get between the viewer, the audience, and the work.
So
to answer your question, because I kind of didn't answer it, it was no. If I'm going to put anything in there, it's not going to be heavy-handed. It's going to be natural, a natural evolution of ideas, of consequence.
Is your view of evil in here?
Yes, that's actually it, and it's not a complete view. I don't. The book itself is a is a meditation on evil, an extended meditation on it. But from what I've put in there, it's like, I don't think that really encapsulates my full view of evil in the same way that Hamlet didn't encapsulate Shakespeare's full view of death for as long as it was. You know, I think evil is something that's ineffable. I think it's very much like I think it's very much like the divine. It's the mirror of the divine, or the malevolent divine.
So you think evil exists?
I think it does, and I think I don't know. It's kind of weird. I've been, and for the last year or so, I've been, my beliefs have been been in a certain amount of tensiveness, and like, well, I'm trying to figure out, trying to organize my thoughts on evil, and so one of the things I always think when it kind of goes back to meaning is, I wonder if there's different ontological planes where you can where things happen, where things are allowed meaning. So on the subatomic level, you have fact, you have objective fact. You know, these things are here. You have probability on the microscopic. Then you have Newtonian kind of consequence on the macro scale. But then when you get to people, it's a mesh of those two, because we're created out of subatomic particles. We have microscopic systems running around in our bodies, and of course we are, as a whole entity, we are macroscopic.
So name an evil person.
I mean, take your pick. I mean, let's say
come up with one.
We could go. You could say Hitler. You could say Stalin. You could say Mao. You could say all that. But I mean, but I think evil is much more, can be much more banal than that, and that it's rooted inside everyone. That everyone has the potential to be evil, because everyone has that light and dark side to them.
So everyone has the potential to be good.
Yes, and that's true. Everyone has the potential to be good, the same way that you have the potential to be evil, and it coexists.
Do you think the people who snapped to Sieg Heil thought Hitler was evil?
Probably not. No, they didn't. But I mean, think about I don't know. Hitler's kind of like the overused example. But I mean, if he'd been accepted,
pick another one.
Well, I mean, but here's the thing. So, simple thing. So if he'd been accepted in the art school, none of that would have happened. Someone else would have come up, because I mean, there's, the zeitgeist of the world demanded that someone was going to step in and do the things that was done, because I think psychologically the masses demanded it.
But is it postmodernism actually a reaction to the romanticism of the Nazis and their reaction to the reasoned world, the modern world?
I think postmodernism was a reaction to the ubiquity of science from the Renaissance ideals, the humanist ideals, the idea that science was the last word, and in all of human life. Well, that creates that's unsettling, because here's the thing is that science is all about removing the observer and making it as impartial as you possibly can. And so if you look at postmodernism, what postmodernism does, it relocates it to the ideology to an anthrocentric view.
So you believe it's impossible to remove the author from the text of the story?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be like removing the author from the action of a human body. It's like it'd be like disassociating your consciousness from your body.
Now, when you write, do you think about all this stuff?
No, no, you don't. You typically don't. Now, here's the thing: when you're writing it out, no, you don't. You don't think about that. So every once in a while, what'll happen is, and at least this for me, anyways, is that you'll have a little writing spree, and then you'll go back, and then you say, oh well, here's some things. And it's usually what happens is it's not conscious. It's your subconscious is percolating things that have been boiling up in the bottom depths of your mind, and it goes out, and it's an unconscious thing. It's not conscious. I mean, no, it's not conscious.
So where's the evil in Harry Potter?
Oh, what's his name? Snope or Snake? Or I've never actually seen Harry Potter, so I really can't answer the question.
Okay, where's the evil in the Brothers Karamazov?
Ivan, Dmitri, and all of them. But here's the thing: when Alyosha is talking with Lyse towards the end of the novel, she's recounting her dream to him, how she had been around by all these men, and they're kind of engaging in some sexual stuff, and then she talks about the Jews, like, well, did they tack a little baby up to a cross, and did they do this, and she says she kind of wanted to hurt the world, and she says, I think people love crime, and Alyosha, whom I didn't really like up to that point in the novel, even though as late as it was like, he says, yeah, I think that's true, and it's that acknowledgement that that he is his father's son, I mean it's kind of it's interesting. You look at Ivan, and you look what happens to him, and with Smirnov.
Well, not a lot of people know, so explain it.
So Ivan is kind of the intellectual of the family. Alyosha is the mystic, and Dmitri is kind of that passionate, the man
worldly person.
Yeah, the Achilles type man.
The guy who thinks nothing about going out and finding some women and enjoying them.
And enjoying himself, yes. He's a lusty man, the man most like his father. But Ivan says that when he's talking with Alyosha, God is dead, so everything is permissible, of course, Alyosha can't really refute that claim, Ivan says, well, you look at the world, and so you have a pair of parents who take their daughter and they rub her in feces and they throw her in an outhouse and they lock her up in there and she freezes to death overnight.
That's quite an image.
Yeah, it is. And so Ivan says, like, well, what kind of God would allow that to happen? And the Gnostics had their own arguments over that. He said that the Demiurge, the artificer, Demiurge translates artificer in Greek. He says, well, they say that it's a corrupt creation. The physical reality is corrupt. But the thing is that Alyosha can't refute Ivan's claim, because it's like, why would God allow that to happen? And Job asked the same question,
So who did the Grand Inquisitor go to visit?
Jesus. In Ivan's poem, during it, he goes and he visits. Jesus comes back. You have the second coming, and the Grand Inquisitor, who is kind of enslaving the people. Through what is it? He goes. Christ is tempted in the desert. What, with bread, power, and there was another thing.
Women.
No, it wasn't women.
You sure?
I'm pretty sure it wasn't women. But be that as may, the same thing that Satan tempted Christ with is the same thing that the Grand Inquisitor is using to enslave the people. He's bread, power, games, and such. But it's interesting. The thing about it is that the Grand Inquisitor usurps agency. He doesn't allow the people to have the choice. So the potential for good and evil is in everyone. But because of the way that they operate, because of the way the Grand Inquisitor operates, they're not given the choice. Stanley Kubrick in A Clockwork Orange, the priest says, if a man is not given a choice, he ceases to become a man. It's like that's an integral part of our humanity. It's like we have to be able to choose.
Well, and some of us believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross to give us that choice.
So maybe I don't think it's really necessary to believe that. I think it's
to believe in free will.
No, I don't think it's necessary to believe in religion to believe in free will. I mean, and this is something. This is kind of a borderline that I've been kind of going back and forth on for years. So the answer I give you now might very well change tomorrow. Just giving you a heads up. But I think it can be secular. I think you can, because it's not what's important isn't whether or not there's divinity. It's whether or not there's meaning. Because you can have gods, and those gods can be meaningless. And I mean, you look at the golden calf. I mean, that's kind of that's the thing. I think one of the problems is when you try to define God. Is that when you try to define God, you try to encapsulate within a word, and then it ceases to have meaning because now it's a part of physical reality.
Okay, then let's go back to. So it sounds like you're talking about existentialists now.
Yeah, I think I've crossed into that little realm.
So are existentialists postmodernists?
I don't think it's necessary. I don't think you can. I don't think that you have to be. I I think that you can have skepticism. I think you can see social influence in the world without being a postmodernist. I think it's something that you have to that anyone does. You don't have to be part of art or literature or any of that. It's just something that people have to confront in their lives, regardless of
Well,
profession.
my understanding is that it's a reaction to the destruction of spirit by modern thinking.
I think it's definitely part of that. Yeah, and it is. So it's but at the same time, science makes powerful claims that are very hard to refute. The people watching the show, guess what? Science brought that
Science
to
has
you.
made claims for tens of centuries that have been refuted.
But that's one of the things about science is that it's something that refutes itself, and it's like a self-evolving virus. And I mean, I don't mean, and that maybe virus is the wrong way because that has negative connotations. But it looks at itself like no other thing does, and it's revolutionized the way that life is. I mean, the way that life is. I mean, here's the thing: it's like the changes, like the radicality of the changes. 14th century, you know, I have
Okay?
I have parents whose lives have not been vastly different than mine. I have children whose lives aren't vastly different from mine. If I survive long enough to see my grandchildren, their life isn't going to be much different. The advances in technology might be, well, they learn how to make a better, you know, stone wall, or learn how to make a better gun, or they learn how to fold steel a different kind of way. Not that way anymore. So with the advent of the repeating rifle, with the advent of the printing press, with the advent of automobiles and mass production and cell phones or just phones and then cell phones and television and radio, each generation is presented with something that creates an enormous gap between generations. It was an interesting thing. I met a friend. I met a guy in Odessa in Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a bit of a child prodigy, and so even though he was my age, he attended college. They
Mm-hmm.
call it university. He attended university there a few years or many years before I did, and graduated with a PhD. He was in economics. He had an economic doctorate, and the way he did studying is he'd go to a library and he'd find the books and he'd go up and he'd read through. Whereas my generation, or actually where I and the rest of us, well, we look up on Google. You know, there's an interesting video out there of this little baby who's being presented with a book, and they before they were given the book, they were presented with a cell phone, and so they're sitting there, they're trying to uh, manipulate the pages. Well, you're existing in a different world. Another 40 years from now, we may have people with chips in their brain who can make them think faster, or they'll have augmentations. They can be and they'll just naturally be stronger, faster,
You're
better.
sounding like our friend Jim Brown.
Yeah, you may be, but that's the way. But that's where technology is going. So, the way I see evil, and I look at, I kind of see it as two permutations of evil, because it's certainly not the totality. But I see the total machine-like nature, the or of the I'd say the I don't want to say administrative state just because of the way the political atmosphere, but the mechanicalness of industry. I see that the kind of slow grinding, like the attrition of World War II. Like I see that as being an evil. On the postmodernist side, I see the narcissistic focus on the individual being another form of evil.
You ever watch Criminal Minds?
I do not. I've never even heard of it actually.
Well, it's about the minds of serial killers, essentially.
Go on.
And I think it's very postmodern.
In what way?
Well, because these killers create their own world with their own morality. They don't think they're doing, at least the way they're portrayed on the show, they're not doing anything wrong.
I think Heidegger talked about the wellspring. And the wellspring would be the idea that rises a civilization. And he says one of the things is that because you have a civilization, it then kind of, he says caps over, I'd say scabs over the over the sacred ground, the sacred foundation that exists within each and every single individual. Now, most people can sit there and they can adopt that civilization because it does have some touch of the divinity in it. Western civilization holds that each individual has some aspect of the divine in them, and I kind of subscribe to that. But in each civilization will have something that's slightly different. But many of them, the ones that last, hold that there's something godly in its subject.
So is there evil in a terrorist?
There's evil in a terrorist, but there's also good in a terrorist. Look at ISIS. Let's take a look at them.
Okay,
let's look at ISIS. I'm going to defend ISIS.
Somebody get the cell ready.
Yeah, good God.
Anyway, go ahead.
The FBI's going to come to knock down my door tonight. Oh, good God. Like them and the anti-fascists, Jesus Christ. Anyway, so we're getting into some dangerous territory. But ISIS, so here's the thing. So ISIS, really what they're doing is like they're really a reaction to the instability in the Middle East that really was kind of caused by us. And I can talk to you about the Greeks and Kronos devouring his own children. I'll get to that.
Right, but now you sound like Donald Trump. But continue.
But no. But here's the thing about ISIS. So ISIS, I mean, a lot of these people, a lot of the members of it, they don't have any real prospects. A lot of them grew up in a world that was so radically different than everyone else that you could say that what we're doing here would be a myth to them. Like how would you have any kind of reality? Think of a child who was born in Syria and at 6 years old, and you have planes that are going up across the sky, and all of a sudden things just explode around you. They don't know why it happens. We know why it happens because we exist within a framework, a civilization that has terms for it, that can describe it, that knows what it is, that can produce it and deploy it. But for like a kid who's like 4 years old, you have no idea what these things are. They could be gods. They could just be natural fauna for all they know. And so their experience is not going to be the same as us. But that doesn't change the fact that there is an actual reality to them that's independent of their perception. But we go to ISIS, we say, well, these people have kind of been traumatized, and like that's not to excuse them at all. These guys are horrible people, but they have.
So they're evil.
But yeah, they're still. Oh no, you can be a victim and still be evil. Look at Richard. That Shakespeare talked about that all the time. Richard III, born a hunchback. Or in King Lear, Edmund, born a bastard. Why should I be looked down upon by society?
Okay.
But to go back to like, well, these people they have no prospect, and so they look at the people around them. They say, well, maybe they have more. It's like, well, why shouldn't I take that? And that's where the potential for evil comes from. It says, well, I reject your divinity. I reject your right to anything, and I'm going to take it. And and like I said, a person who grows up in that, that's a legitimate response, but it's evil because of the damage that it does, because it's not sufficient. Evil, I think to a great level, is always insufficient. It's insufficient to itself. It cannot self-perpetuate. At least not for long. It's like the Black Plague. It killed so many people that eventually died out.
No, actually, that's not actually why it died out.
Oh, really?
That's another.
No. You can correct me.
No, actually, it's been discovered the half of Europe that lived, is missing a gene.
The iron
The iron
deficiency.
gene.
Yes,
I
yes.
think that's probably one of the stories I told at Moni's among the many
I'll let
others.
you think that.
Okay, whatever. Um, so all these things we've talked about,
Let's move on to alcoholism.
how do how do writers, how do books affect all these things?
I could have.
I mean, do you think somebody can understand the reality of the baby that went over the bridge
Yeah, I think
in
so.
this book?
It's kind of having to. I think it's what is it? Repeat the question again. Let me think about that another.
All right, there's a scene in the book where you know that.
Yeah. But I mean, but what
familiar
was the
with-
original
Well,
question?
the original question was, we got to start to wrap this up because we're just about at the end. but
Okay.
Is there a reality? Can anyone understand the reality of when your heroine, the pilot,
Mm-hmm.
grabs this kid or baby and just throws it over a bridge, shoots it, throws it over a bridge?
I may not have a long enough time to answer that question. So here's the thing. So I'll try and say this really quick since we got to wrap it up. So here's the thing: is that part of the writing process is that you have to. Is if you're going to depict things realistically, you have to dig really, really deep inside. You've got to mine the nastiness out of it. So I talked about the potentiality of evil and good that each person has, so when you come to the realization that you could throw a person over a bridge.
Shoot him and throw. I don't think I could.
Yeah, but and for what I would always say is the person who doesn't think they're capable of those things are the ones most likely to do it. There was an interesting.
Okay, and on that, and the person most likely to do it is the person who thinks they can. We're gonna wrap it up here, and I hope you join us again in the future. Again, Eric's book, "Things Fall Apart" by Eric Vargas, available on Amazon. It's self-published, which actually makes it warm my heart. And in case you ever need a fire, there's plenty of kindling here. But anyway, it's been a wonderful Normat night. I mean, on the books. Thank you for coming, Eric. And
Thanks for having
we
me.
shall see you all next week. I got 2 more guests scheduled for the 13th and the 20th of this month, and it won't be nearly as intellectual as it's been today. I love Eric. I love the show, and I hope you come back and listen. It is not your typical Bowie Media show. And we're out of here.